When I bought my home in Willow Creek Estates, I thought I was making the best decision of my life. It was a beautiful neighborhood, tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and homes that looked like something out of a magazine. The HOA promised to maintain the beauty and harmony of the community, and, at first, that seemed like a good thing. I didn't realize that behind the perfectly manicured lawns and smiling board members was a system designed to bleed homeowners dry. It started with a $200 fine. I came home from work one evening to find a bright yellow violation notice taped to my door. Failure to maintain lawn according to HOA standards. Confused, I stepped outside and inspected my yard. It looked fine, green, neatly trimmed, nothing out of place. I checked the HOA rulebook, which I had barely glanced at when I moved in, and found that grass height had to remain between 2.5 and 3 inches. I grabbed a ruler. My grass was 3.2 inches. I couldn't believe it. A $200 fine over 0.2 inches of grass. Annoyed, I mowed my lawn immediately and decided to ignore the fine. Surely they wouldn't enforce something so ridiculous. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. Unpaid violation. Additional fine applied. My $200 fine had turned into $500. I called the HOA office, expecting to reason with them. Instead, I was met with a cold, robotic response. All violations must be paid in full. If you believe the fine is in error, you may submit an appeal at the next HOA board meeting. The meeting was 2 months away. I was furious, but I figured I'd settle it later. I had other things to worry about: work, bills, life. That was my second mistake. Over the next month, more violation notices arrived. One for having my trash bins visible from the street for more than an hour after pickup. Another for a single weed growing in my flower bed. Each fine started at $100 or $200, but with late fees and penalties, the amounts doubled and tripled before I even had a chance to address them. When I finally attended the HOA meeting, I brought a folder filled with photos proving my compliance. I was ready to argue my case, but the moment I walked in, I knew I didn't stand a chance. The HOA board sat behind a long table, looking down at the homeowners like they were judges in a courtroom. One by one, people pleaded their cases, only to be dismissed with, "The rules are the rules." When it was my turn, I explained the situation calmly. I mowed my lawn the same day I got the notice. The grass was barely over the limit. I don't see how a $500 fine is reasonable. The board president, a woman named Linda Carmichael, smirked. Homeowners are responsible for maintaining their properties at all times. If we allowed exceptions, we'd have chaos. The fines stand. I left that meeting feeling powerless. The system wasn't designed to be fair. It was designed to keep people paying, and I had just become their next target. The next month, my total balance had ballooned to $2,000. And then, the real nightmare began. I thought the fines were bad, but I had no idea how much worse things could get. By the time I wrapped my head around what was happening, my total balance had reached $2,000. And the HOA wasn't stopping there. One morning, I woke up to find a notice of delinquency taped to my front door. According to the HOA, I had 30 days to pay the full amount or risk further action. That phrase sent a chill down my spine. What did they mean by further action? I called the HOA office again, hoping to speak with someone reasonable. Instead, I got the same monotone response. Failure to resolve outstanding balances will result in additional penalties. No explanation, no options, just a demand for money. At this point, I started doing research. I found online forums filled with stories of HOAs using fines as a weapon to push people into foreclosure. They'd start with small violations, pile on late fees and penalties, then claim the homeowner was in serious delinquency. Once the debt reached a certain threshold, the HOA could legally place a lien on the property. If the lien wasn't paid off, they could foreclose on the home, even if the homeowner was up to date on their mortgage. Panic set in. I checked my account balance again. $2,000. I was dangerously close to that threshold. I tried to fight back. I sent letters disputing the fines, contacted a local attorney for advice, and even reached out to some of my neighbors. To my surprise, many of them were too afraid to talk. One elderly man, Mr. Dawson, whispered to me in his driveway, "They've been doing this for years. People who fight back just get more fines. Some had to sell their homes just to get out." That's when I realized this was a business. The HOA wasn't enforcing rules to maintain the neighborhood. They were using fines to trap homeowners in a cycle of debt. And if someone couldn't pay, they'd take the house and sell it to someone else. By the time I got another notice in the mail, my balance had climbed to $4,500. The letter was short and brutal. Failure to pay will result in a property lien being placed. I had 15 days to come up with the money, or I'd be one step closer to losing my home. I had to act fast. I contacted a local news station, hoping they'd be interested in the story. I figured if I could expose what was happening, maybe I could get the HOA to back off. At first, the reporter I spoke with seemed intrigued, but 2 days later, she called me back with an apology. "Sorry, we can't cover this. The HOA threatened legal action." I was stunned. They were shutting me down at every turn. I only had one option left. I needed to find a way to take them down from the inside. The clock was ticking. With just days left before the HOA placed a lien on my home, I knew I had to do something drastic. I wasn't just fighting a fine anymore. I was fighting to keep my house. After the local news backed out, I realized I needed to find another way to expose the HOA's corruption. That's when I stumbled upon something interesting in the community bylaws. Any homeowner in good standing could run for the HOA board. If I could get on the board, I could see the finances, challenge the fines, and expose their tactics from the inside. The problem? The HOA elections were coming up in just a few weeks, and the current board controlled the voting process. They had rigged elections before, ensuring that only their own people stayed in power. But I wasn't going to let them stop me. I started going door to door, talking to neighbors. At first, many were hesitant. "You can't beat them," one woman told me. "They always find a way to win." But when I explained what they were doing to me and how they had done the same to others, people started listening. I wasn't the only one drowning in fines. Many of my neighbors were afraid to speak up, but they were tired of living in fear. I built a coalition of homeowners who wanted real change. We gathered signatures to demand an independent election overseer, preventing the HOA board from counting the votes themselves. When the board realized we weren't backing down, they tried a new tactic, smearing me. They sent out emails to the entire neighborhood calling me a troublemaker and warning that if I got elected, I would cause instability in the community. They started issuing more fines to the homeowners who supported me, hoping to scare them into silence. But their plan backfired. The more they tried to control the neighborhood, the more people saw through their lies. When Election Day arrived, we had record turnout. Normally, only a handful of homeowners bothered to vote, but this time, nearly the entire community showed up. And when the results were counted, I won. The moment I stepped into my new role on the HOA board, I demanded to see the financial records. What I found was even worse than I expected. The board had been illegally inflating fines, fabricating violations, and using the money to pay themselves. They had even sold off foreclosed homes at a discount to their own friends and family members. This wasn't just HOA corruption, It was organized fraud. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. I took everything I found and turned it over to the state attorney general's office. Once the authorities got involved, the entire scheme started to unravel. But the fight wasn't over yet. The HOA wasn't going down without a fight. The fallout was immediate. As soon as the state attorney general's office opened an investigation, the HOA board panicked. They tried to cover their tracks, shredding documents, deleting emails, but it was too late. We had copies of everything. Neighbors who had once been too afraid to speak out started coming forward. Some shared stories of how they had been forced to sell their homes after being buried in bogus fines. Others revealed that they had been threatened with legal action just for questioning the HOA's decisions. The state's investigation found hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent charges, money that had been taken from homeowners and funneled into personal accounts belonging to the board members. Several of them, including the former HOA president, were arrested for fraud, embezzlement, and illegal foreclosures. With the corrupt board gone, we held an emergency meeting to overhaul the HOA. All unfair fines were wiped clean, illegal liens were removed, and we rewrote the community rules to prevent any future abuse of power. As for me, the new board dismissed my debt entirely. The $200 fine that had nearly cost me my home was now nothing more than a bad memory. For the first time since moving into Willow Creek Estates, I felt like I could breathe again. No more waking up dreading another fine, no more feeling like I was fighting a losing battle. Our neighborhood was finally a community again, not a business designed to exploit us. This experience taught me something important. HOAs only have as much power as homeowners allow them to have. When people stand together, they can fight back, and they can win. Looking back, I realized that if I had paid that first $200 fine without question, I might still be trapped in their cycle of abuse. Instead, I fought back. And because of that, we took down an entire corrupt system. I nearly lost my home, but in the end, I got something even more valuable: justice.